welcome everyone. This is Jimmy Chu. I'm going to be talking today about modernization and explain how we build new applications, refactor existing applications, and leverage serverless technologies on the AWS platform. Today's agenda, I'm going to walk through a quick intro to ClearScale, talk about our application modernization services, and then we'll walk through kind of what does it take to build your first modern app or modernize existing apps, right? What does that process look like? And then I'll explain some of the best practices and learnings that we've had over the years and what's really important when you have a modernization journey ahead of you. And then last but not least, I can talk about one of our success stories. An introduction to who we are is ClearScale. We're an AWS premier consulting partner. We've been in business since 2011. We're all in AWS. We've completed over 900 projects, all on the AWS platform, and have a wide variety of customers in all industries, all verticals. And we are a global company with remote resources all over the nation and the world. Let's talk about building your first modern app or engaging on your first step in the modernization journey. So start with an assessment. Always start with an assessment. For a modern app, that's really coming from what are the business needs? What problems are we trying to solve? What capabilities does the business need to support our customers, to grow that business, right? Whatever that mission is. If it is application modernization, then that includes an audit, taking inventory. What are my, and this could be portfolio, right? Maybe you have a portfolio of multiple products. It could be at that level or down to application level or certain product. But we want to understand what are all the pieces of the product? What are the technologies involved? What are the integrations, right? And this is where we're going into kind of evaluating it, right? Like looking at that portfolio, looking at how are all of these components interrelated. Maybe one product talks to another, or I'll give you an example in the acoustic story. They had these 8 products, and one of the missions was we need a single pane of glass, right? SSO has to go across all of our apps because currently users have separate logins for each app, right? So those are the kind of things that we're evaluating. And in that evaluation, what's important is we also understand the value of down to the component level of these applications. Because I will tell you when we start getting into large scale, right, really complex applications, the effort to modernize every single bit is pretty heavy. And so what we want to do is once we evaluate the potential pieces or the potentials of modernization, we got to decide what's the highest value, and that's where we plan our modernization efforts on. Right? For smaller applications, we often see full modernization. Sometimes we build entire applications. But for a large deployment, we really have to go through kind of this prioritization method. And I know that there are multiple strategies out there. One of the more historic strategies is let's start with low-hanging fruit. And you've probably heard in the past, hey, let's try to move DR to AWS, make sure that's good, and then kind of inch our way in. Or let's just move dev over and see what's going on. Or, something very easy to prove out, some basic technology, which it's not a bad strategy, but we believe wholeheartedly that this whole process can be accelerated. And when we accelerate it, we change our strategy slightly. We are ranking these things by value, because remember, we're trying to accelerate value to the business, deliver value incrementally, and deliver it often. So in that sense, we build a list of and prioritize components, applications, products by value, and then we have our targets on how we want to move forward, right? That's typically how we recommend creating the roadmaps, especially in legacy app transition into cloud native. Once we have our bearings on those priorities and align them to your mission of your business and where you need to go and strategies, throughout the org, then we go into implementation. I can't stress how important this kind of assessment and planning process is, right, for that ultimate alignment and getting the business the most value in the shortest duration of time. So for those of you that are on the modernization path, whether it's during your migration or, you know, just the modernization effort that you're running to improve that infrastructure and application, there's some decisions to be made, right? So we can either retain some of the applications. And in this case, what I recommend is as we're doing that assessment, when some of these applications boil up and maybe they're ranked as is not high value, maybe the business is not requiring a lot of features and functionality to be added to a certain component or application, we may consider retaining that piece, right? Maybe it's something, it's a known quantity, it just runs, not a lot of innovation going there, and we don't really see, a huge roadmap for that component. We may choose to retain it just as it is in where it is. We don't often see that. Usually, you know, even during that modernization path, we're doing a rehost, which is the bottom left here, of just moving that application as is with no changes. At least we get the benefits of the AWS, resiliency in their infrastructure. Now, during this process, we may retire applications that either are not needed anymore. And again, I'm going to refer back to that acoustic use case. There may be a retirement because that technology is no longer going to be available, right? And for acoustic, it was their actual identity management and SSO were tied back into IBM IT systems. So we actually had to retire that completely. So, the next few are more, I'd say, forward looking, where maybe you're running a particular service today or application, and we're going to repurchase something that is maybe the latest and greatest. Maybe we're using some sort of old IDP system, and now we've heard great things about Okta. We've assessed that technology. Yes, that's something we want to use to secure our environment, secure access. All right, then we're just going to repurchase that service and not have to manage, this whole IDP setup internally, right? So really moving to some type of software as a service to replace a piece that may not be core to your application or core to your business. The next one is to replatform, right? This is, and lumped into replatform for me is, let's move from our Microsoft SQL Server onto an RDS platform, right? RDS SQL Server or RDS Postgres, something that is managed within AWS. This is also where I would argue that the containerization happens, right? I'm moving from a server-based platform to a container-based platform, but the app is essentially the same. And then there's Refactor, right? Refactor is where we are seeing the most innovation happen because we're taking the opportunity to look at the requirements. What is this application doing? And then getting the wheels spinning in our heads on how should we do this in the future? What benefits can we get by having a Lambda that fires off, based on a trigger, right? Based on a need. How do we move this old school legacy application, create microservices, and then build a message bus? So now that we can process things in parallel. Just a few examples. And also the refactoring is where ultimately we are seeing new products emerge based on existing data sets, or the capability to then continuously update and improve maybe an entire product. So very high value in the refactoring area. Another key ingredient on how we put together and deliver a modernization project is using an agile approach. Right? We do, whether it's developing infrastructure, doing a migration, rebuilding an app, or building a net new app, we go through sprint cycles for that. Right? Again, creating incremental value as we march towards our goal of the completed product. Now, this is how the engineering execution works. I will say that for product redevelopment, we do also create a structure above the agile sprints that manages these time blocks as more what you would call the waterfall method. So we definitely create a hybrid approach, but execution teams are always running sprints. They're always moving fast, thinking fast, delivering fast, responding to changes very quickly. I thought I'd share a quick example from a real client of their 2 year modernization journey. And in this plan, we've accommodated for a very specific milestone at the first year. And this is the roadmap for the acoustic project, where at year one, or this is actually 10 months, we had to exit the data center. So in order to exit the data center, there was a lot of containerization, new product builds, all of these areas. So we replatformed the infrastructure, refactored a ton of applications. We even refactored some of the databases, right? So moving off of DB2 into Postgres, for example, going from Hadoop to EMR. Some of the Oracle was moved into Postgres, right, as part of the database refactor. Now, because there was this definite constraint on timelines, we did choose an alternate path to rehost a few of the services within these different areas, and then continue to refine them in year two. And for this, I talked about prioritization. So we did that based on the business value we needed to achieve. And at the tail end of this, a lot of our refactoring efforts went to flagship product. Right? They had one product that was the heavy revenue driver. That's where they needed to have all of the innovation. And so that's where we focused on taking things out of Oracle, putting them into things like DynamoDB, S3, and so on, so that the teams could roll forward with that quickly. I wanted to share a couple of things that I've learned over the years. We can call them best practices, but they are things that we definitely want to keep an eye on and have their rightful spot in the modernization journey. So it's not just about technology, right? So when we do the assessment, I know we kind of focused on talking about technology in the slide earlier, but when we focus on a true assessment and taking that inventory, we're also looking at what people, processes, how do we manage organizational change? Because these are kind of the areas that we see are going to be critical for organizations to continue to innovate, continue to modernize. Because I mean, this game is always changing, right? Technology is always moving. So, what we're seeing now is breeding that culture of ownership, right? You see this. People talk about getting scrum teams, and they take ownership for delivering on their sprints as a team, and so on. Everybody's taking more responsibility of their piece of the puzzle. So we definitely want to assess, where is your organization on that continuum, right, of culture of ownership, and how do we put programs and training in place to kind of breed that, right, to move you towards that if you're not already there. And then architectural patterns, this is definitely on the technology side, moving to microservices, using lambdas, using managed services. Those are the patterns that we see in modern application development, right? Usage of message bus, right? That's also a really strong one. Now, computing, again, containers, Lambda, as serverless as possible, right? And that extends into AI and ML services as well. Data management, right? We don't want to, for example, we have Oracle, so well, anything we develop, let's just throw it in there, right? The old school of thinking is, well, it takes too long for me to stand up some other database, so I'm just going to throw this table in there. Let me just get through my project. And in AWS, we have to breed, right? That the next one is developer agility. We have to breed that into our folks to be able to fail fast, deploy something, choose a different data store, put this on there. And that enables us to really build towards these purpose-built data stores that are decoupled. So they're easy to release to, they're easier to manage, and from an application perspective, easier to control through the release cycle. And to add on to developer agility, the more we can abstract them from the operational side of things, get them to focus on building cool features and deploying new services, and setting that as a standard across the organization. That's another thing that we got to create programs for if an organization is not there yet. And then operating model, I already mentioned, as serverless as possible to offload a lot of the traditional IT. Let me check the logs. Let me do this. Monthly maintenance, weekly maintenance, daily maintenance. That's what the cloud provider does. So we want to leverage as much of that as possible. And then last but not least, when we start to enable developers to go out and just start building anything they want, right? And playing with any service they want, we have to start thinking about, wow, the scale of development is going to increase. The velocity of development isn't going to increase. Our infrastructure is changing, right? There's all this new horizon of possibilities. So we have to be able to manage that with programmatic guardrails. And there's some simple tools in AWS. We could start with Control Tower to deploy the framework for that. Right? There's still some things we'd want to customize and build out, but that's going to be increasingly important as you scale. Now, another key piece of at least what we see the modernization journey when we're helping our clients is our resource model. So we deploy squads and we scale out. Like if we have a large project, we deploy multiple squads where there's technical leaders. They run their own sprint cycles, right? Within each of these squads, they're a stream of work that can operate independently. But then we wrap them up under a principal architect or solutions architect to provide kind of oversight so that we are all marching towards the same beat. We're all moving in the same direction. And then the way our teams are structured is our technical leads have ability to reach back into a pool of SMEs. So because in flight, we're an agile, we have to get used to doing things with agility. In flight of a project, things may change. And we need to be able to pull in, hey, we just switched data stores. Hey, give me the DynamoDB guy. Let's get him in the project, and we need him to build this for us, or answer this for us, or model this for us. And so they have full capabilities to do that. But the critical piece, right, building the right team, the critical piece in doing that is in our model, that SME pool, we encourage our clients to populate that pool with their resources as well. So while we're executing on a project, we always believe in co-delivery. That way, our clients get to touch, feel, be a part of the development, the architecture, the design, everything of that modernization process. And so they own it as well, right? So we move forward through the process. And that way, when a particular feature or product is now in production under this modernized architecture, they already own it. They know everything about it, right? There's no, we're trying to reduce the learning curve there, right? And at the same time, we're also recommending specific training for each of the resources on our client teams. So very, very key, right? We want to be able to continue execution once the system is modernized. And this seems to be by far the shortest way to get there. So one of our best practices when we're designing architectures to think as serverless as possible, especially for irregular workloads, right? The workload is unknown or is very spiky or even has a low execution rate. You can use serverless to significantly reduce costs for idle periods, and then also highly recommend using event subscription model instead of polling, right? This allows us the greatest flexibility, and also if you know when we start to build out that product even more and we need to split these streams, definitely accommodates for that type of innovation much easier. And also using serverless, products from AWS, we're able to implement projects very quickly. A few other key learnings: focus on the business logic first. Sometimes we tend to dive into the technical pieces because, oh, we already know that application, we've been running it for years, but focus on the business logic first. What are we trying to achieve? There may be a better way, or maybe there's, for some of our clients, when we rethink the business logic, we're able to come up with stuff that disrupts their market. So very, very important. Focus on business logic, go with the serverless. There are a lot of infrastructure as code templates. You can find them with Terraform. You can find them with CloudFormation. They're there. Use them, right? To just spin things up, get moving quickly. And then always leverage out of the box auto scaling. It'll save you a lot of pain trying to implement scaling later. Or it'll also prevent you from getting into situations where you're way over provisioned. So, guys, there's a ton of customer stories that we could cover. I thought I'd jump into one story that leverages AI and ML. It's kind of like that the modernization project type that is really adding that incremental value, helping to build a piece of a product or a product and delivering value very rapidly. So Creative Practice Solutions, they're in the medical space. They provide business services to medical professionals. And within this practice, there was one area that it took a lot of manual effort, right? It takes a lot of expertise to be able to use a human to listen to a recording, figure out what doctors and patients are talking to, and then be able to then translate that into what am I going to bill the insurance company? What are the specific medical codes? It's a very complex process. I won't get into the details of that. So Creative Practice Solutions came to us and said, can we do this another way? We've heard about, AI services. Is there something we can do there? So we took a look. Again, we did the assessment. We thought back to what's the business logic? What's the true solution you're trying to do to go after? And then we put together a proposal for them to shorten that timeline for delivering value. So leveraging AI services to complete most of that interaction. I included an architecture diagram of that solution. The point here being that we're going with all AWS services, all serverless solutions. We won't cover the details. So in this process, we take our business logic. What are the requirements? And we're able to quickly translate them to AWS services. There's not a lot of coding that went into stitching these services together. It was a small Node.js app. There, just to manage chunking up recordings and passing them over to transcribe medical. And then we have step functions kind of to manage that whole process. We created a UI to be the front end of all that processing and the back end so that their doctors and the medical transcription experts can leverage the system. So this product eventually was named BugMD. I find it a pretty hilarious name, but it works across multiple operating systems, recognizes English and Spanish up to this date. And because we're using serverless technologies, it's available to them at a low cost, right? Pay for what you use. So ultimately, the benefit for creative practice solutions is we've taken something that was a large development effort in the past without AWS serverless solutions and AI services to build something that can translate Spanish to English, figure out medical terms, do some processing with fuzzy logic to map them to billing codes, and then create resulting sets. That's a Herculean effort, right? And in this case, in order for us to pull up a prototype and get this thing running, we're talking merely weeks. So you can see how a product can be born in weeks versus months and years. So I'd say that is the biggest business impact it had on creative practice solutions. And as far as application modernization services, I'm going to break it down into a few categories here. Personally, I'm going to talk from the bottom of this deck, uh, microservices and architecture. So we've been helping our clients break down monolithic applications into loosely coupled microservices. And this big push is really to allow our customers to enable rapid deployment, right? Everybody wants to shorten the time to value for products, services, and features. And so this is one architecture change that enables that. It's one piece of the puzzle. Now, when we break into microservices, and this is really application related, when we start down that path on a parallel path, we often see infrastructure catching up on containers and serverless. So this may look like deploying containers on ECS, building a robust ECS platform or EKS platform, and so on. Introducing Lambdas and other serverless technologies into that operating environment. And then as we move on and we're looking at more and more value, right? Now we're looking at really product innovation. This is where we get into application and DB modernization, really figuring out and reimagining if we were to rebuild a product, a service, one single application within that service, and we had the opportunity to reimagine it on a serverless platform, what does that look like? Does that change our data flows? Does that change the database that we choose? Because now in AWS, we're always moving towards using purpose-driven data stores. You get the best bang for the buck, and you get very specific capabilities for what we're trying to do. And then above and beyond that, we have mobile application development capabilities, whether we're building native Android or iOS apps, we're doing hybrid application development there, or, web-based mobile applications. And then in the application development area, we've got teams of developers that are working on, Java, Node.js, React, you name it, and all in the effort to reimagine our clients' platforms, or in this case, building new apps that are greenfield, right? So some of our clients come with, your basic functional requirements for an application, and we're taking it to the finish line from there for a complete product. And that concludes my presentation for today. I hope you could resonate with some of it. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or want to discuss this further.